I believe it is streaming. Okay. Welcome, beautiful souls. I am so glad you are here today for our powerful live stream, The Truth About Self-Love. Because, let's be real, when you are in survival mode, bubble baths and mantras just aren't going to cut it. In this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on what self-love really looks like when life feels hard. We'll unpack myths, talk about how internalized shame chips away from your worth. We'll guide you through grounded, spiritually rooted practices to begin rebuilding from the inside out. I'm Leann Herron, a transformation coach for women, the founder of Finding Resilience with Leann, and the host of Happiness on Tap podcast. I'm a passionate advocate for women's health and empowerment, specializing in helping women break free from the cycle of overgiving and the stories that keep them stuck. My wonderful co-hosts, Lisa Anzaldua, a holistic psychotherapist, spiritual coach, and neurodiverse couples counselor who is transforming lives with her deep and integrative approach to healing and personal power. Lisa specializes in helping clients heal trauma, navigate neurodiverse relationships, and resolve generational patterns. With her clairsentient abilities and whole person therapeutic model, she gives individuals towards meaningful change by honoring the full human experience, mind, body, and spirit. So Lisa, why don't you lead us off and tell us what we're going to be diving into today?
Yes, so today we're going to focus on specifically self-love and really what it means. There's sort of multi-layers, multi-facets to that definition and the experiential relationship to self and self-love. So we're going to kind of high level what it actually means. And then from there, I'm going to speak about, as part of that definition, includes such as, for instance, the integration of all different parts of ourselves. So it's the love for each and every part of ourself that oftentimes, of course, we've got our core true self, the centered self. And then as we experience life throughout the years, we experience things that cause us to kind of split in that experience in of itself. We split off into almost like an additional personality type. It's various aspects of our personality ultimately. And there's an opportunity for healing and reintegrating, calling back in that aspect of ourself, that part of ourself that feels there's been a wound or some sort of trauma-like experience that hasn't been resolved. So part of that includes this process of reintegrating these different parts of ourselves so that we can become more, feel more in alignment and whole. And that's through self-love. It's the experience of loving these parts. I'll go into more detail as we progress. So this is just kind of a high-level overview. But the power of self-forgiveness. So that's just sort of the beginning of that. Would you like me to elaborate, or should we have a conversation around it?
Well, let's go ahead and get started with self-love. And you're going to talk about the importance of it in relationships and how this connects to the work that you do. So give a little bit of information on that as well.
So in working with various difficult, let's say, challenging relationship patterns, so there are all sorts, right? There's the experience of potentially relationship that is, the fundamental experience is a trauma bond without one's awareness of it. Or there's personality dynamics that are interfering with a healthy relationship unfolding. And one of those challenging relationship dynamics is with neurodiverse couples. Oftentimes, if there's an allistic, meaning non-ASD, autism spectrum disorder partner, and another who is on the spectrum, then that poses a very unique conundrum with the two in really harnessing those differences in a powerful way that is effective and constructive and feels good in the relationship. So oftentimes, and I meet with women, usually it's women, but of course, men and women have this experience, but I work with neurodiverse couples. Oftentimes the allistic partner is a woman that I'm working with. And they're at this place where there seems to be no solution to the challenge. It's a very unique challenge, which I'll go into a little bit more. There seems to be no solution to making this work, or to potentially in a healthy way uncoupling if necessary. Point being, when we are in a place where we cannot change the external environment or the other person, we have to go within. We have to work with our own inner technology, the tools we embody. And in order to work with those tools in a way that is constructive and powerful and life-changing, sort of the premise of that is self-love. So the tools are really, you've got the practical things. We've got our breath, so breath work. The reason why that's a powerful tool is because it starts to regulate the nervous system, allows for entering into various brainwave states so that we can tap into the subconscious mind, do some really deep inner child healing work. It also allows us to tap into the superconscious mind, which is, what we might perceive as the universal source, divine, however you would perceive that, and that guidance around that. And so that's a powerful tool, the breath that we inherently have, the brainwave states, and so various other tools. I'm happy to continue if necessary, but in order to utilize those tools in a way that is effective is first through self-love. And I could continue on that thought unless you have a specific question. Leann, I feel like I'm starting to dive really deep into it, which is okay, I suppose.
And I still feel like I'm learning so much from you, although I do have experience with that kind of coupling. There's just so much in the woman's role and where she has to go with learning self-love for herself, learning, setting boundaries and different modalities for healing those old wounds. Like you were talking about trauma bonding. That's a fairly new term in my vocabulary. Other things like inner child work and shadow work. So there's still, I think, another level that you could go a little bit deeper before we move on.
Yeah. So right. So here, let me kind of step back too and give a kind of a broader perspective before I go fully in there. And what I wanted to say is that, oftentimes, and as you already mentioned, oftentimes people think, well, what is self-love is such a used word. It sounds beautiful. Wouldn't it be lovely if we all just loved ourselves? And it's not as superficial as one might think. There is an actual process. So I spoke of that process briefly of integration, kind of prematurely. I spoke of that, integrating the different parts of ourselves. That's an actual journey of process of self-love, because you're loving these different parts of yourselves. Literally, you're turning to them in your mind's eye in a state of meditation, and you're visiting these parts wholeheartedly and loving them and getting to know them. And that's bringing light to them. And that is the process. That's a kind of a process of self-love. And then there's the conceptual self-love, which is essentially, it's the recognition that we are not our stories at all. Like, nothing that we could put in terms of a narrative relative to any other narrative isn't our highest truth. And in fact, our highest truth is that we are, all of us are emanations and expressions of the one source, of the creator, of or creation, of universe. And so it's just this surrendering. The invitation is this surrendering of the idea that your status, this is all ego construct for survival in our 3D reality that is sort of beginning to soften as we enter into more of a heart-centered consciousness, which is the recognition that these previously identified aspects of survival, which is status, so you're comparing yourself to other, and that's how you think you should love yourself. So if you're better than someone, you should love yourself more. Or if you went to a certain university that seems elite, therefore then, or if you didn't, you shouldn't love yourself, that you're less than. So there's this kind of like pedestal, this kind of constant comparing and self to other, and using that comparison with all those sort of markers as whether or not you're lovable or you can love yourself. And I'm inviting completely the opposite of that. It has absolutely, the invitation would be for one to explore, to release those constructs really, and to recognize how inherently, inevitably, you are source itself. You are one with source, and like a ray of sunlight, source is the sun, and you are an emanation. It's still a ray of light. It's still the source, right? So there's sort of like the holistic kind of broader perspective of what I mean by self-love, is sort of integrating that new paradigm, and then going through it's a paradox, right? And then simultaneously going through all these different parts of ourselves throughout our timeline who've experienced, these are still within our energy body. These experiences from the past remain within our energy body until we turn to them and love them. That's what they're seeking. And that's the process, I'd say. So there's the conceptual, broader perspective, then there's the process of integrating these parts, and you're kind of working with both paradigms. So that's really what I mean. And lastly, just to kind of tie it in with what does this have to do with relationships and challenging relationships specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's because oftentimes whenever we're in a position of we're failing at, so to speak, we want to so bad, and this is the kind of neurodiverse kind of dynamic is relationships. We want the other person to be so different. We need them. We literally need them to be different than they are. And we're suffering as a consequence of that need. It's an actual physiological, emotional, attachment related, biological needs that are because of the differences, both parties are not meeting each other's, right? What to do in that? It is to turn within and both turn within and become that source of love. And it's not a super, I don't mean, oh, then you should just, it's the classic, what you seek is actually within. There's actually wisdom in that truth. It's absolutely true. So how can one begin to just turn inward and start doing this inner work, and their whole world will change. The reflection of what their life is will begin to change. People in their life will begin to sort of conform to that new sense of self. And then one's in heart brain coherence, then they can decide how to navigate the relationship, either within it or outside, or in other words, uncoupling potentially. I don't, there's always a possibility, right? So it's returning to a sense of empowerment through self-love. So I hope that's clear.
Yeah, and I'd like to go a little deeper in that I know you, when you're working with your clients, one thing you do is some like internal family systems. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what that means, because I don't know that everybody will know what that means. But how you utilize that when you have the woman in the scenario who is feeling unworthy, over responsible, or just exhausted from this constant caregiver role, or their own wanting that person to change.
Yeah, so you spoke of a couple different parts there, right? So I would say, yeah, let's talk about, let's start kind of in the reverse order there. So there's a part of you that really is seeking that person that is not feeling safe within the relationship. The emotional body is not safe. And so it's striving for having it an effect on that person's behavior so that you can feel safe. And so then I would, if I was working with you, I'd say, let's get to know this part, this terror. It's really terrified. It's a very fearful state that is kind of always kind of present. And so I'd want to go into this part, and we can use the present experience as a window into, here and now, what's happening, but even take it further back. And I would explore, was there a time, of course, in a safe, this is very trauma-informed process. Was there a time where, is this brand new to this relationship, or have you felt this? And it could be, or have you felt this in the past? Is there a part of you that's been there for a while that doesn't feel deserves the attention, the affection, the love, attunement? Was there an experience? Was that sort of the early life childhood paradigm that you grew up in, or was there a specific moment in time? Sometimes it's not just the overall conditioning or paradigm with our attachment figures. It's actually a moment in time. Oh yeah, there was a boyfriend when I was a teenager who, X, Y, and Z, and you haven't, this part of you is still there. So you feel like a teenager when you're interacting with your partner now as an adult. When you feel that trigger, you feel as though you're a teenager, because that's an indication that, okay, that part kind of split, so to speak, right then into a different consciousness and kind of stayed there where it thought it was safe. Let's go in and give that part what it needs now. It needs to be seen. It needs to talk about what happened. It needs to then energetically allow for the presence of what was missing to be given to you. And that's where the mind's eye, the other tool I wanted to talk about, the active imagination, is so powerful, is that we can reimagine those experiences and neutralize those initial emotional integrations that happened at the time. And that's kind of the healing of, so there's a little bit of, in a nutshell, kind of experientially, what I would say is internal family system. It's just think of it as a Russian doll. Those Russian dolls that are kind of one goes inside the other and the other. Yeah, so you've got your core true self, always you are your own healer. And that's from the core true self. You know how to heal. It's the part of you that is feels the most aligned, for simplicity's sake. And then there's all these other parts that have been born throughout the years of experience that, now imagine if someone said, and we say this to ourselves, we think this is self-love. We're like, just get rid of that part. Why aren't you getting over this? Like, you shouldn't be feeling that way. And then you react from a part, and then let's say that part wasn't your best self, and then you shame yourself and you feel guilty and you can't sit. It's like trying to cut these parts off. And that's the opposite. It's the absolute opposite of what we want to do. We want to actually, there are no, when you read about internal family systems, it's so true. This statement that Schwartz always speaks of, the sort of one who kind of created this or brought it into fruition is a therapeutic practice. There are literally no parts that are bad. They're all just, they got confused. They didn't see what was the whole picture at the time. They were hurt and they're vulnerable. And then there's another part that protects that vulnerability. And that's the one that kind of lashes out potentially, or is excessively shopping or addiction or whatever it may be. It's protecting. It's all good, So getting to know these parts is the process for self-love.
So when you're working with the client, I'm sure there's many layers that you go down a step at a time, working with them to acknowledge those things or identify those things, and where they came from, whether it was something from their childhood, whatever's keeping them from feeling safe, reclaiming their younger self and caring for their younger self. And also those shame triggers, kind of working through those and acknowledging that those are the things that are there originally to protect us, but learning how to listen to them in a way that's now in the positive as opposed to having this constant shame.
Yes. Yeah, shame. Yeah, think about, when did shame come online? That's not a natural state. Source didn't, all is source, but the reason why shame feels bad, it feels bad because it's not the truth. You're perceiving yourself removed from the truth. That's why it feels bad. And our emotional bodies indicating when we're veering off of what is actually true and what isn't. So shame feels bad. It's your emotional body is trying to tell you it feels bad because it's not true. It's true for that part, but ultimately, whatever you're shamed about, it's your becoming so hyper focused on context, and then you're making it mean something about you that it's this lower energy centers start to kind of come online and think, what does it mean about me in the context of social context? And that's what shame is. It's like saying, is this judgment, this perceived judgment from others. So you judge yourself first. And it's like you can't, it's like this false idea that you have done or are something that is not good. And all these kind of flooded ideas about, you think you find evidence of that pointing to why you're not good. You should be ashamed. You just kind of like scan the situation or environment to prove that you should feel ashamed. And it's all just a false construct. And so it's like, what you do with that is you turn toward, okay, let's visit shame in its fullness. Let me go there. And this is done in a alpha state meditation kind of calmed state. So your nervous system actually knows you're safe. You're not in fight or flight. So you can go there. You can bring new energy of safety to the situation. You visit it from safety. And then you say, tell me more about that. So you meet it where it's at, right? Shame, yeah. It's a terrible feeling. Where do you feel that in your body? Talk to me, like tell everything about it. Cry, talk about how horrible you are, and let it speak, right? And then meet that and say, okay, what is it that it came online because you needed something in that moment? Yeah. What did you need? You needed, I wish we were doing it live, so I can give some context so it would make sense as I'm talking, but just remember, you always let it express, and then you kind of ask what it feels like, how old it is, and then say, what do you need? And then what you need is to know that you are fully accepted and loved no matter what. Unconditional love. And so you bring that. So I ask people, what would that look like? And this is nothing to do with external people because we can't control them, but it might be a memory of a grandmother, or it might be an energy body. It might be source. It might be warmth. Allow that part that was a shame to feel that in the body, like fully pull it in, and until it feels the resolution there, then and there, and breathe into it. So shame is kind of a protector too. So it's like saying, if I shame you, then you're kind of proving to the world that what you've done, what you've done is wrong. So there's kind of layers here, right? And so then you're like, thank you, protector, for you created shame for me also. I see why you did it. Makes sense. Is there another way? I appreciate it, but is there any other way you could show up for me and protect me in a way that doesn't feel so bad, or something like that. So there's this dialogue with the different parts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to go through for anyone who is unraveling a childhood or childhood experiences, and understanding that a lot of our beliefs, thoughts, and even our identity isn't always something. It's not us, like you said. It's not our truth. It is things and thoughts and beliefs and things that we inherited. And so now when we look at those things and we question, is this really my truth? Is this really my belief? Then that's, where I've been able to unravel and change those beliefs and go within and look at my core values, and then look at, how I can reparent my inner child and provide my child with whatever she didn't have that
I
makes
love that you
it
said,
so real.
yeah, that's right. I love that you mentioned there's another layer. I love that you mentioned value. So that's the third kind of component of the self-love. So got the bigger perspective, we've got the more nuance, and then you said value. So it's like, remember the ray of sunlight analogy? So imagine God was like, let there be Leann, What does that mean? What does Leann in God's expression, source's expression of you, what would be the natural unfolding of Leann? Like that's called, being crystallized. It's like, it's not the other things, the interjections, the conditioning, that's here for a reason. We have these karmic kind of opportunity. This lifetime is to evolve our souls. And in order to do that, the karma is the challenge, is that which is the source of that which would force the soul or encourage the will of the self to evolve spiritually in this lifetime. So there's that aspect to it. And also, what is your highest truth? How do you know that Leann is being Leann? Like full authenticity. There's nothing more liberating than that, right? So that's when life starts to kind of fall into place, is because you're being so true to yourself. You are yourself for a reason. You are specifically designed as Leann for a reason, for you to reflect back to source this aspect of its own self. And so go with it, right? And so, and values is a way of discerning what that is. What are my highest values? You can really, there's a process for that. And some people, it's hard to kind of figure it out, because it's difficult sometimes to be self-reflective, especially if we're in survival mode and, kind of living kind of like in those states and the challenging relationship dynamics. So we've got to create space for ourselves to that deep introspection and discovery of who we are. And that's an act of self-love, to allow yourself to naturally be who you authentically and truly are.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I kind of went on a riff there just with what you said, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah,
Values.
there's many layers of self-love. One you mentioned earlier, I definitely want to touch on it, is self-forgiveness, because I think that is so important and such a sacred turning point in our healing, is to understand and be able to practice self-forgiveness.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time do you remember a moment in time where that clicked experientially for you?
When I was doing, the work and self-reflecting, I'm always taken back to raising my children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, I have internalized that maybe I wasn't a good parent, or I could have been different, or and so learning how to forgive myself, that I was doing the best that I could with what I had and what I knew in my situation, as opposed to beating myself up and saying, oh, I'm just this terrible parent, or I turned out just like my mother, like I said I wouldn't, just those kind of inner voices and inner dialogues.
Yeah, and so it was a conscious effort, it was a conscious decision. It's like a part of you recognized that you were doing the best you could. Yeah, beautiful. And did you notice a difference in did that switch things for you as far as what changed as a result of that self-forgiveness?
I think it helped me release a lot of wounds, a lot of things that I had been carrying for so long, this guilt, self-worth, self-judgment, being able to have self-forgiveness, I was able to release those things.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so so to kind of elaborate on that is that right? So oftentimes we have this, that's a very strong part that is judgmental of the self and others. It's like this condemning kind of part, and it's intelligent with it. All the parts are there for a reason as far as relative to survival. So they're always intelligent manifestations, intelligent with respect to, again, the 3D idea of the ego construct survival. Ultimately, they're not. Ultimately, they're destructive. But in and of itself, from that context, is that if I judge myself, then it's like there are two ways that can show up. One is I'm getting out ahead of it so that others don't judge me. I'll just judge myself first. It's less painful to do it that way because I've already put myself on the whatever in the pit. Like I myself have put myself in a pit. Therefore, there's a part of me and another part of me that is better than that other part because it can witness it being wrong. So there's this kind of thing happening. But I just want to point to self-forgiveness wouldn't even be a requirement if judgment wasn't the precursor for that. Imagine living in the world with zero judgment. I don't mean like one's judgment of situations, but I mean of people and ourselves. Imagine if you didn't judge anybody, right? You didn't glorify them nor put them beneath you for any action, any situation whatsoever. Anyone. And we didn't do it to our own selves. And imagine how liberating that would be. So self-forgiveness is like this opportunity to also explore judgment and the liberation and release of judgment from your perceptual body, way of perceiving things.
Yeah. And I think I did that a lot in my healing, not only self-forgiveness, but in releasing anger and resentment to others who had harmed me, being able to forgive or acknowledge that kind of same thing, like they did the best with what they had. And that was such a huge release and something I was able to let go of, carrying this anger and resentment, and not just on myself, but for other people. And so then I was able to see them completely differently.
Amazing. That's the work. That's self-love. You're not hurting yourself anymore with those thoughts. Yeah. So yeah, I could keep talking. I've got all sorts of things to help solidify that, but I know we're thinking of the time.
Yeah. And you have a journal prompt that you would like to provide to people on self-love?
Yeah. So okay. Okay, so I'm gonna say so we've got maybe a prompt. Can I give 3 prompts? It might not be complicated, but yeah, I'll make it as simple as I can. So remember we have the 3 layers of self-love. One, the fuller paradigm, ray of light analogy. You are source itself. And then there's the integrating the different parts in this 3D timeline by loving them, kind of attending to them with love. And then there's the highest values. So like I was saying, let there be Leann. Like what is your core true essence, right? Getting to know that part. So, and that's through identifying our values is one way to do that. So I'm going to invite 3 little exercises with that. One is can I invite folks to start learning, if they're not already doing meditation, start with the Silva method meditation, because that will just allow you to access that alpha brainwave state. and spend some good time there, getting familiar with that. And there you can find it online, YouTube, 15 to 30 minutes. And then think the next time, journal prompt. So you asked for a specifically, and I had mentioned journal prompt, but I'm starting to change a little bit. But what you could do is journal the next time you feel triggered. The next time you feel triggered, think of this as an opportunity as a window of opportunity into a part of yourself for that internal family systems work that I mentioned, for you to explore that part from a place of love in that alpha state meditation. And you can journal, you can start this journal, you could be like day one, trigger, you write the trigger, and then the next morning go back to it, because sometimes in the moment we can't address it. But then in that alpha state meditation, you go back to it, you do that self-love I was describing earlier, and then journal about that experience. So it's kind of getting to know these different parts of yourselves. And then lastly, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to simplify it because this is a huge exercise that could be a whole workshop, but just take one aspect of your life that is, let's say yours, let's start with something simple, your physical life, your physicality, your health, and draw a line on a scale and ask, is a scale 1 to 10, ask how fulfilled am I within this area? How in alignment do I feel within the scope of my 3D physical experience? And then wherever that, let's say it's a 3. Say, okay, beautiful. So ask these questions, and these are the prompts. 3 questions. Why is it a 3 and not a 2? So that's going to start pulling in, what your sense of your identity, your belief system with respect to how well you're doing there. And it's also kind of pointing to what your values are. And then ask, and what would bring it to a 4? And not a 10, a 4. And let's say you say, it could be, I'm using a practical, simple example. But there are different domains of our life. There's the spiritual, there's the intellectual, there's the relationships, there's deeper aspects, not that the physical being isn't a deep thing. It's very spiritual in and of itself. But so just for simplicity, this is the easiest to kind of grasp. Let's say they say, what would make it a 4 is I eat more greens throughout the day. Simple, right? Beautiful. Okay. What would make it a 6? You go all the way up to 10. And now you have this complete picture of your highest kind of timeline potential. And then you start asking, okay, well, how will I, to go from that 3 to 4, what am I going to do to make sure that happens? And you just stay there. You don't do it all the way up to the top. And then it's kind of beginning to shift your focus into what's possible for you and self-ownership, self-empowerment. And so just start with that.
I love it. I love the simple steps. That is so helpful for people while giving them the future thought, so that you can see where your potential is, but not see it as being so big that it keeps you from taking that one step to go from a 3 to a 4, and then from a 4 to a 5. And it doesn't have to be one step every day. It's just, what is that one step? And like you said, journaling back on, how did that feel? When you made that change, did you notice a change in how your body felt, how your mental clarity was? So yeah, that is something that I have learned to do that has been very powerful, even with my meditations or hypnotherapy sessions, is to journal immediately after, although sometimes it seems like it'd be really difficult. But if I wait, I've noticed that I tend to forget things. So if I journal kind of right away, even if it's just chicken scratch, quick thoughts, 1 or 2 words, then I don't forget everything that happened in the moment, and I can go back to it at a time when I'm a little more calm and reserved and had time to think about it.
Love it. Love it. That's such a good idea. That's such a good idea. Do you use the same journal? I don't know if anyone's like me. I forget which journal I've written Do you have this kind of one working journal, like
Journaling
personal?
is kind of a weird thing for me personally. Like I never did really good with like a regular standard just a journal that just has lines on it. I do better with like a calendar type of a journal. For whatever reason, I think it's just part of my childhood and issues I had with writing when I was a kid. But as I grew up, I learned how to organize my thoughts in a more professional way. So I learned how to do things on a calendar and live within a calendar. And so that helped me easily be able to go back and look for things. When I was journaling, I found that then I couldn't find where I had written something down.
Yeah.
It was like,
So
oh,
you
I
put
have
it
five
all in
journals.
that
Which one?
day's, I make myself crazy. So you put it all in that same calendar. Oh, that's brilliant. So the day that you have the experience, put a note to the self in the calendar. Thank you for changing my life. I hope that viewers will benefit from that. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
I'm also a word processor person, so I can easily type more than handwrite. It
Yes,
just seems
yes.
to flow easier for me.
Okay, that makes
So
perfect sense.
just another
Awesome. Oh,
suggestion.
yeah, this has been so fun.
It
Thank
is.
you, Leann.
Yeah, thank you. So for our viewers, please drop us a comment. Let us know the takeaways you got from this. Let us know what self-love looked like for you today, lately. Let us know if you have any questions regarding some of the exercises that Lisa gave you. And we'll be checking back with those. And we're going to be doing more of these. So keep an eye out. Make sure you subscribe if you want more information about me or Lisa and who we help. Our information, our websites, and other information will be in the show notes. So please make sure you take a look and reach out to either of us if you have any questions. It was so great to have this time with you today, Lisa.
Thank you. It was great for me. Thank you. I'll spend time with you.
All right. Well, we will talk again soon.